take up any more of Jill's time. I'm just going to say that I think you'll find that her presentation is wonderful and that the book is well worth reading.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Hi there. Thank you for coming. My name is Jill Sylvester. I am an author and a licensed mental health counselor working with adults, adolescents, and children in private practice in Hanover. Why I wrote the book is because I'm a therapist, and also because I'm an author at heart, and that's my greatest passion, my first love. But what inspired me to write this book, The Land of Blue, which is young adult for ages 12 and up, and also for adults, is to help people to discern between the voices in their head of the ones that plague us with the negative voice that's shaming and berating and holds us in regret and worry and fear and anxiety, and then the other voice that we all have. And again, this is something that's just standard human behavior. It's something that we all deal with. But between the two voices of our higher self and our lower self. So as a therapist in private practice for 10 years, it's a common thread that I found in working with all populations is that this is what gets us the most. And so I wanted to reach people outside my office, and really the seeds were planted for the book many years back when I started thinking, this is the work I was doing in session with people. I wanted to reach more people out of session to really help people with anxiety and depression and all the disorders, that people find themselves plagued with, that really affects us all, because who don't we know that has anxiety and depression and all of these things, right? It's something that it's part of the human experience. So I wrote the book originally I wrote it because I wanted to help kids talk back to OCD and to help adults. And then it just morphed into something so much bigger. It's a very spiritual book. It's a very deep book. There's many metaphors. Essentially, The Land of Blue it's a YA fantasy fiction novel about a 12-year-old girl whose father goes missing into the land of blue, which is a metaphor for addiction, depression, and anxiety. And it's the story of what happens to 12-year-old Cassie, the protagonist, when she chooses to enter the land of blue at the quest of the depiction of the negative voice in her head, the character Agatha. So she takes her into the land of blue in order to find her dad. So it's a fantasy fiction novel, but it's essentially self-help under the guise of fiction. Because again, the impetus was to write the book in order to help kids to learn how to talk back to this voice, and then it just morphed into something bigger. So it's something for adults as well. It's for parents to guide their kids, particularly younger kids, to be able to sit with them and read through the book, because it can be a very deep book. And for avid kids that are avid readers, they certainly get quite a bit out of it. So that was why I wrote it. Lots of metaphors in the book about addiction and depression and anxiety, and how to deal with it, and how it faces us. So for example, I don't want to give the book away or anything, but part of one of the metaphors in the book is the ship called the Enticer. And that's a metaphor, obviously, for addiction, because it comes in so many forms, and how things present to kids it could be anything. It could be the foods we eat, the bad foods we eat. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs. But the way that the metaphor of addiction presents itself, I used as a metaphor called the Enticer. And ultimately, the theme of choice, right? On whether we get on board the Enticer or we don't. And so the journey through the book is to arrive at a place of social and emotional well-being for the character, and for those along the journey with her. So that's a lot of what the book is about. The themes of, a lot of people have used the term mental illness to talk about the book. I'm not a fan of that, even as a counselor, because I tend to think that when we focus on things being a mental illness, it's something we feel that we're stuck with, and I tend to be not that kind of a counselor at all. I have more of a holistic bent, so I tend to look at things from a place of, we've all got these struggles, and it's what you're going to do with it. And so when you can look at something with with that kind of an energy, it tends to make you feel a lot more successful in dealing with these negative things that come up. And so that's how I presented it with Cassie in the book, which is another theme. Because, you know, a lot of us, I would say most of us, there's not many people that I have met who haven't had a family member right now who hasn't dealt with one of these issues of anxiety, depression, and addiction. It's affecting all of us on so many levels, whether it's your neighbor, or your friend, or your dad, or your mom, or your aunt. You know, everybody's got this in their life to some degree. So the book is about exploring the themes of that and how it affects us all, so that it doesn't, you know, tend to isolate people who feel stuck in that and make it feel like it's something just based on their life and their family. And that's, again, the other theme about it is, in the book, is exploring the theme of family. Because just because we come from a line of people who struggle with, you know, any of the things mentioned in the book, doesn't mean that Cassie has to repeat that pattern. It doesn't mean that the readers have to repeat that pattern, even if your dad struggles or your mom struggles, or, you know, whatever it is. So it helps to teach kids that it's not their fault, and just because it's in your gene pool, and just because someone in your family struggled with it, doesn't mean that that's your life sentence and that that's going to plague you. So there's a lot of tips and techniques under the guise of metaphors, again, through the book, of how to, you know, to learn how to navigate that and to not feel so alone, and ultimately for kids to not feel like it's their fault, you know, because that's what happens a lot of times is kids take on that responsibility, and there's a lot of maladaptive patterns that can happen for kids as they grow when they come from a family of that. So that was another catalyst of the book, is to teach kids how to, you know, really try to reset their inner navigation system in order to meander that world and end up at a much better place than sometimes your family members do, you know, and to be able to love them through it all the while, and to accept it. The other theme of the book, and there's many themes, friends and family and addiction and choice, is to also explore the theme of good anxiety. There's a metaphor that I use in the book called the energy of the bees. It's that energy that we get when we're so uncomfortable, when things come up in our lives. But, you know, as adults, we can look back on sometimes those things that have been most uncomfortable for us are the things that make us write a book, are the things that make us, you know, take a different job and start new relationships. It's those things that make us move, right? The catalyst of that. So helping kids to understand that just because you have symptoms of anxiety or feelings of anxiety does not mean that it's a bad thing. And that's where we introduce that higher self, that higher voice, and being able to say, well, which one's talking in my head right now? Which one is making me feel really bad and really nervous, and where sometimes the disorder comes from, right? The pathology of it. But which is the good anxiety? How about the anxiety that helps us in life to not be so content and complacent and be able to grow and experience more things as a result of getting a little uncomfortable? So it explores that topic as well in helping, you know, again, adults and kids to be able to kind of, you know, look at that within themselves and say, you know, what do I do with that when I have that voice inside myself? You know, how do I navigate that? How do I deal with it? Because really, as adults, once we learn to work on our own, you know, emotional stuff, we help our children, we help our grandchildren, we help other people in our lives. So the book is meant to explore all of these themes and to, you know, ultimately give people some tools to be able to work with it while taking just the reader on a wild ride through the land of blue, which is a fantastical voyage. So that's essentially what the book is about. When I began working with my editor on this book, she had said to me, you know, I envision this book in every classroom in America, to be able to teach kids and talk about it, or, you know, in the classroom with kids, and, you know, that would be the ultimate goal, because it certainly belongs in an English classroom, because you can dissect it, you know, right, you know, down to every level. It would take a semester in college to go through it. As my copy editor said, there's just so much to review and explore. But it also belongs in health and wellness for kids, because unless you're a really avid reader, 12, 14, 16 years old, you're not going to read a 422-page book. You're just not going to do it, especially with, you know, computers right now and social media. It's not going to happen. So if you bring it into a classroom in health and wellness and explore 3 chapters a week, 5 chapters a week. And you sit and you talk about each chapter, and I'm developing actually curriculum questions this summer for the book, because we have local schools that have started bringing the book in for summer reading programs. When you do that, now you've got kids in a classroom who are going home for assigned reading, and they have to read these chapters and come back and talk about it. And that's where the magic happens, because you're pulling kids out of their bedrooms, out from behind their screens, dealing with all of this negativity that's around them, from the political arena to the familial stuff that's going on with addiction right now, and so many other topics that are just so prevalent in today's society. And you're getting them in one room and you're saying, let's discuss this. What's Cassie's journey? What's happening with her dad? What's happening with her mom? And all these different questions we can ask kids without them retreating and not choosing to take part in that. So that would be, ultimately the vision for the book. And it's a grassroots effort, we've discussed it. And just, a little bit at a time. So it's always a nice feeling when a school calls me and says, can you send me the book for review? And then letting me know it's on their summer reading list for middle school. Typically 8th and 9th grade is our target for target audience, but again, it could be in a college classroom, depending on the lens that you view it from. So the other part, where the book came from is a long time ago, in the early stages of my practice, I had noticed that I had a few children drawing pictures of things that they saw in their bedrooms or things they saw in their dreams. And it was fascinating to me because I had also seen those things as a child. And I was like, there's something to this. And I started asking adults if they had seen these things as a kid. And other children, and all of a sudden it became this thing like, I saw that. I've seen that in my dreams. I've seen those kind of scary kind of faces kind of thing. So I worked with it for several years, just watching kids draw these pictures and talk about these different things that they would feel when they were afraid or alone. And again, there was this common thread through. So it became a subject that I was really interested in talking to people about, and something that it almost seemed like a wave of relief when you would introduce this to people and get them saying, oh my God, like I thought I was the only person who saw this. And I would be invited to book clubs where women and men would say, I've seen that too. And so it was really cool. So that was the other piece that I wanted to write about, so that kids started to feel like they weren't as alone, because it wasn't something that was being discussed without feeling too scary, so that was part of it, without giving too much of it away in the book. But it was certainly another topic that I wanted to address in this book, in helping kids, helping adults with some of the things that they're feeling. So lots of stuff in this book. That's my focus as a therapist, is promoting stronger mental health, and as opposed to focusing on the psychology and the disorders and all the, tell me your problems kind of thing. It's more about helping people understand the good that happens when we feel these things sometimes, because it's impetus for growth and being able to, to learn and grow as a result of the discomfort that we feel. So that's the book in a nutshell. There's much to talk about, but I want to try to keep it as basic as I can. And then Diane, you had also asked me to talk about how I wrote the book. As a therapist, again in private practice, a very busy practice, I wrote the book from 4 in the morning till 6 in the morning for many months, so that I could, get my kids off to school and get to work. And that was really the only time I had to write the book. And then from there, once we got the outline done and things started, really taking off, I started taking more time to be able to do that. So I cut back a little bit in my hours seeing clients to be able to write, and then just, made it a practice of writing at least a couple hours every day. And then some days taking off in order to write more. And it's really, what I love to do, and you're a writer, Jack, so it's, it's just something you have to do, right? Once you get it started, you just have to do it. So, so that's that. So lots of content I threw out there. Are there any questions before I do a little reading of the book?
Well, it sounded like, at one point at least, you were thinking about just doing a kind of self-help book. Or at least that was part of your motivation. And then, but you decided to write a novel. And
Yeah, okay, so I see what you're saying. So, yeah, so I wanted to help kids be able to talk back to OCD. That was the first seed that was planted, that I wanted to do that. But in order to reach kids, I wasn't going to write a self-help book. So that's why it was self-help under the guise of fiction,
Right.
because I wanted to make it a story. So the thread that I worked with for years in practice was this is the thing that plagues us all. It's that, you know, the two voices that we all have in our head, the higher self, the angel, the demon, you know, the whole thing, and using the metaphors of that in the book. So that's where the idea came from. And then it evolved, really. It was just a matter of sitting down and saying, I want to write through a little girl's eyes, and, you know, have her be the protagonist with a father that was struggling, because this was something that had come up, you know, obviously in the news, and it was just so out there with people struggling with so many things. And so the idea was originally born of wanting to help that, and then it just evolved into this girl whose father had gone missing, and how she listened to this voice in her head and then followed that voice into this land, and the quest to ultimately save her dad is what the book is about. Chapter 1. Gray clouds filled the sky that August afternoon, and yet the heat still felt unbearable. Cassie Connor, in her worn-out denim shorts and second-hand red Fenway Park t-shirt, sat in the white plastic chair in the corner of her grandparents' porch, directly behind the overgrown shrubbery so she wouldn't be seen. Waiting for the mail to arrive, the backs of her slim, pinkish-colored thighs stuck to the slats of the cheap chair. Everything felt unbearable for Cassie these days. Her dad had left 3 weeks ago, and she didn't know where he'd gone or why. The last time Cassie had seen him, he had tucked her into bed, softly singing the lyrics to Queensryche's Silent Lucidity. The song had been playing on the radio in Mom and Dad's old Ford Escape on the way back from supper at the China Dragon. Dad had lowered the windows all the way down, the evening summer breeze lulling Cassie into slumber. As she lay in the back seat, her eyelids grew heavy. Just before falling asleep, she caught a glimpse of Mom's hand on the steering wheel and the green numbers on the dashboard clock glowing 11:45. Cassie remembered her father, drowsy from the late night out, scooping her up from the seat, carrying her like a puppy into their first-floor apartment, as she watched half his face and the countless stars in the night sky. Whispering to Cassie as he walked up the 3 brick steps, the smell of cologne on his skin and beer on his breath, her father had told her a clear night sky meant it was going to be beautiful the next day, but it wasn't beautiful at all. When Cassie woke up Sunday morning in the 2nd bedroom of their small apartment in Roslindale, a neighborhood of Boston, Dad was gone, somewhere, and no one in her family would tell her where he went. Frustration consumed Cassie as she slumped in the porch chair with her arms crossed over her chest, blowing her straight, sweaty, caramel-colored hair out of her face. She thought about the occasional letters sent home. Well, not home, but Cassie's grandparents' house in West Roxbury, a few miles away in a quiet neighborhood where she and her mother now lived. Cassie couldn't figure out where the letters came from because her nervous, gum-chewing mother, who cried the entire day they moved in with her parents, always intercepted the mail before Cassie could see the return address. When Mom wasn't home, Nana Helen, in her green polyester pants, hightailed it to the porch and snatched the mail from the postwoman's hands. This infuriated Cassie. After all, she was 12 years old and starting 6th grade in a couple of days. She felt she had a right to know what had happened to her father. Cassie wanted to know if her dad left because he wanted to or because he had to. Maybe someone kidnapped him or something. Her mind raced. Her left leg bounced up and down, making a sweaty suction noise against the chair. She bit her thumbnail until there was nothing left to chew, and it started bleeding. Cassie tried to stop, taking it out of her mouth a couple times, but she just couldn't help it. Every time she bit her nails, a voice in her head, a cackling yet soothing voice, encouraged her. Go on, it's all right. It'll make you feel better. The voice instructed Cassie to do all kinds of things, especially when she worried about homework, or whether someone was upset with her, or about her family not being together. Only land on the even-numbered steps if you want to get an A. Step over the cracks in the sidewalk, or the girls at school won't like you. The voice even made her think about things that could happen, like what if there was a fire in the house? You had better straighten your bed every morning, just in case. Cassie followed the voice's instructions because if she didn't, then something really bad might happen. Like the time she forgot to step over a crack on the sidewalk outside of school, and Mr. Lovell, her favorite math teacher, got the flu. If Cassie messed up, say, stepping on an odd-numbered stair, she always went back and started at the beginning. She had no choice. She had been listening to the voice for a long time.
And I was just wondering if, you can see in Cassie in the beginning, she's got a lot of that kind of anxiety, which, manifests itself in the obsessive and compulsive behavior and so forth. But just maybe not in terms of the book, but just generally, how do you distinguish? How do people recognize the difference between the good anxiety and the bad anxiety in advance? So if you get through it and it helps you grow and you get a new job or something like that, you can say, that was good back then.
Right.
But how do you recognize it when you're facing it?
Mm-hmm. One makes you feel bad, and the other one is something that you feel like deep down, if you explore it, you know you have to do it. There's something in you that is part excited, part afraid. But one is just straight awful. It's one that berates. It's a voice that likes, keep biting your fingernail. Keep biting it until it bleeds. And how that higher part of you, that good self, that spiritual, whatever your beliefs are, that's never going to talk to you like that. It's never going to talk to you like that. It's going to encourage you. It's going to encourage you to face the unknown and to step out of your comfort zone. But it's never going to talk to you in a way that hurts you of any kind. But when you're used to thinking that way, and that's all you hear, and not in a clinical sense of but that typical voice that we all have in our head. And that's what I mean by that. The root of it is really fearful. It's really fear, and it's just negative. It's very negative. Whereas the other one is like, should I join that soccer team? Should I go out for try that new instrument? Should I try that AP class? It's that thing of like, I'm afraid, but I'm not going to get hurt. It's not a negative tone. It's more fear of the unknown, and that's the difference. In again, teaching kids of how Cassie does it, and how Cassie learns to distinguish between those two voices, and where she ends up as a result in being able to make her own choices is, what we'd like the reader to. I'd like the reader to be able to figure out on her own.
Why did you decide to have your character as a girl rather than a boy?
I liked the idea of a girl because I felt like we needed some girl protagonists in stories, and I did, actually she has a friend that she takes with her voice of reason, her literal earthbound voice of reason, and then a boy that she meets in the land of blue. So 2 girls and a boy are the 3, and we had a lot of 2 boys and 1 girl kind of thing in a lot of the books, right, with Harry Potter and stuff, so we needed a girl. I have a line of cards called Planting the Seeds, and these are our first set of cards, and these are for kids 5 through 8, and they're cognitive behavioral strategies of how to teach kids how to think well at an early age, and teaching kids, eating good foods to think well, dressing for success, all empowerment techniques, how to think well, how to start the day with a positive attitude of gratitude, and really planting these seeds early on to help them later on in life. So these are for kids 5 to 8, and then our other cards are affirmations for kids 8 to 12, and that's more statements. So when you find yourself in a situation where you feel completely chaotic and out of your body, saying an affirmation like I am safe and repeating it over and over in your mind helps to get yourself, even if your anxiety is at a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, even down to a 6, is much more manageable to hold it in your hands than when you're escalated up here. So that's what Diane's referring to our cards. So this is Trust Your Intuition, 100 Ways to Transform Anxiety and Depression for Stronger Mental Health. So they're tips and techniques for adults and motivated adolescents to be able to trust that wisdom, that higher self inside of you, to be able to know what to do in these situations and to teach you how to do that. So this book comes out May 31st. But again, more tools, but more in a straight self-help, kind of a way. So,
Thank you.